When I was 12 years old, living on a farm in northeastern Iowa, there was 5 of us kids. And one weekend, my mom and dad left to celebrate their 16th wedding anniversary. And I remember Saturday night being brought home because the mom and dad were coming home. And I remember sitting on this chair in our basement, bending over, unlacing my boots. And my brother came down the stairs. I just looked up at him and I said, "Are mom and dad home?" And he looked at me and he said,
How many times are we accused of not caring about both mom and baby? What are you going to do with those babies after they're born? Are you going to adopt them? Well, our next guest, JT Olson, helps to solve that problem through his organization, Both Hands, and his book, The Orphan, The Widow, and Me. What a great book. What a great read about the story of how Both Hands was created, where you take the beautiful gift of adoption and also couple it with helping a widow in her time of need. JT gets to tell that story. We're so glad that he is on the program. And please join me for another episode of Living Pro-Life. Hey, we're so glad to have JT Olson here with Both Hands, the author of The Orphan, The Widow, and Me. We're so glad that you're on the program today. Thanks for joining us, JT.
"Thank you, Brian, for having me. It is an honor. I love your organization and what you do. It's great to be here."
Well, thank you very much. And you run a group called Both Hands, and let's get right into it. You talk a little bit about it in your book and kind of the story and how that got rolling. But what is Both Hands? How did that get going?
It is a great backstory. What we do is we help families raise money for adoptions, and we do it by serving a widow, helping a widow out with things around the home. And honestly, it's better to explain how it happened. I was doing a golf tournament fundraiser about the turn of the century. I sent letters out to people, said, "Would you sponsor me while I golf?" And I had a buddy who I was in a Bible study with. He sends my letter back to me, does not include a check. He just took a magic marker and he scribbled across my letter. He said, "JT, if you told me you were working on a widow's house, I might sponsor you, but you're just golfing. Nice cause, but not my money." Hurt my feelings a little bit, but at the same time, I was thinking, "Oof, that's a pretty good idea." And I called him a couple days later and we talked about it and laughed. And the idea just never left me. Whenever I saw a 5K or a golf tournament after that, I kept thinking, if all those people were working on a widow's house, would it be better? I just didn't have the orphan part figured out. So a couple years later, I'm in church, running a good friend of mine, hadn't seen him in a couple months. I said, "Hey, Don, what's up?" And he looked at me and said, "We're adopting 4 kids from Moldova." And he's already got 3 kids at home. And I said, "What happened?" He said, "Well, I went on a mission trip with Sweet Sleep, delivering beds to orphanages, fell in love with this little boy, George, got home, started the process. And in the process, we found out George has 3 siblings. And Don looked at me and said, "We're not going to break up the sibling." And that took me back to when I was 12 years old, living on a farm in northeastern Iowa. There was 5 of us kids. And one weekend, my mom and dad left to celebrate their 16th wedding anniversary. And us kids were farmed out to different places. And I remember Saturday night being brought home because the mom and dad were coming home. And the neighbor dropped me and one of my brothers off. And, I was dirty. I'd played in the barn all day. So I had to go in the basement to change. My brother went in the front door. And I remember sitting on this chair in our basement, bending over, unlacing my boots. And my brother came down the stairs. I just looked up at him and I said, "Are mom and dad home?" And he looked at me and he said, "Mom and dad are dead." And I said, "What?" He said, "Mom and dad are dead. They were killed in a car accident an hour ago." And he turned around and walked upstairs. He was in shock. He had just heard himself and he was coming down to tell me. But I remember that moment. I remember hitting that cold cement floor and crying like any 12-year-old would cry. I know what it's like to be an orphan. I know what it's like to wonder who's going to take care of us, what's going to happen to us now. I know what it's like to try and just wrestle with the thought of never seeing mom and dad again this side of heaven. And how I wish my last conversation with my father would have been different. but I know what it's like to be an orphan. But I also know what it's like to be rescued, Brian, because 3 months before this accident, my mom and dad and my aunt and uncle, they changed their wills that if anything would happen to one of them, the other would take them. And my aunt and uncle lived in a very different situation than we were in. They were in a very nice suburb of Milwaukee, not a rural farm in Iowa. And they had 3 kids of their own. They were 33 years old. And they took all 5 of us. I mean, I know what it's like to have someone come in and say, we got you. So back to the hallway in church. When Don looks at me and says, we're not going to break up the siblings. I mean, honestly, I'm the best guy to say that to, because I'm not going to sit there and say, are you sure? I'm sitting there cheering him on, saying, here's a man who's trusting God in a way that I envy. But by then we had adopted, our 5th child's adopted from China, Gracie. I knew it was going to be expensive. I said, how much is this going to cost? He says 70 or 80,000. I said, do you have any idea how you're going to do that? He said, no. And I said, I think I got an idea. That was the first project. Don and I, we recruited some friends. We got 14, 15 friends. We found a widow in Nashville who needed help. We got all the supplies donated, because everyone we talked to loved the idea. I mean, we told them what we're doing. They go, yeah, dude, what do you need? Yep. You need some mulch, you need some flowers, you need some paint, and sent letters out, just like my buddy said. Would you sponsor me for the day while I fix up this widow's house? All the money I raise is going to go towards the cost of this adoption. And we spent the day working on Miss Lucille's house. I mean, it was an amazing day. And when it was all over, we'd raised a little over 70,000.
Incredible.
I was blown away. So that's really how it all started.
So I know last we spoke, you talked about how this little tiny idea and this letter that was sent back to you about a golf tournament has turned into something pretty miraculous. So over the years, it's just grown and flourished. I love the idea, and apparently a lot of other people love the idea too.
Well, yeah. The first project was in 2007. In 2008, I left my job. My wife was a stay-at-home homeschool mom. She went to work outside the home. Bless her. and what God's done with her career is amazing. She now is head of development for Intercessors for America. And she just does that very well. But we started Both Hands in 2008. And now we've, 17 years later, we've done, this is the best part, Brian, 1,452 projects in 45 states. And we've raised $21.5 million for families and organizations to use. Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, what's incredible is how God can take something that's hard and painful, and he turns it into a passion. He turns it into a cause. He turns it into something that's important to us. And I think that's what he does with all of us. He's like saying, you think for a minute I'm going to waste those tears, JT? Those tears are going to come something that's going to be amazing. And, over 1,600 kids are no longer orphans. And over 1,600 widows have been served. Of the 21.5 million, this is kind of a kicker that makes it really sweet. 100% goes to the cause. We don't take anything out for operations. So
that's incredible.
It is amazing.
Yeah. So over the years, tell me a couple of those stories, maybe some of the widows that you've helped or maybe some of those adoption stories.
There's several of them. And so many of them, sometimes I need to go back and remind myself because there's so many of them. But, the cool thing about whenever a Both Hands project happens, God shows up in one way. I remember one big project we did. A gal came in. She had really grown far away from God. She lost her brother in a motorcycle accident, and she was really kind of bitter. She showed up at a Both Hands project. I mean, what she saw was the hands and feet of Christ. What she saw was people giving their life away, unconditionally, expecting nothing in return. Just like what she saw was these widows getting a foot washing. I mean, she accepted Christ as a result of what she saw that day.
Incredible.
Another good one. There was one that I think was in California. This family did a project. They raised money. They went to Ethiopia and they served this widow. And they got their son. They came back, and this widow became like an adopted grandmother. And this widow, not only did they work on her house, they adopted her, as their grandmother, and she became very attached to this family. Well, about 4 or 5 years later, I think it was, they went back to Ethiopia for another adoption. This time on the way to Ethiopia, the widow from the first project went with them.
Incredible.
That's what I
incredible
said.
news. Incredible. So again, we're speaking with JT Olson, the author of The Orphan, The Widow, and Me. Great book. Talks about kind of his history and also the great start of Both Hands Project. And so take us a little bit back to maybe your time in college. You talk a lot about your time in college and your door-to-door salesman book sales. So tell me about that story and how that's impactful about the kind of the next generation and how hard work is really important.
Well, it had a massive impact on me. I mean, when I went to college, I went to the University of Wisconsin. I went there to major in partying, and that was where my mind was at that point in my life. And I accomplished a lot of that first semester, first year in college. I hit my goals, but the life was not going anywhere. I was introduced to this concept about selling. I had this stereotype about salespeople and door-to-door salespeople. There's no way I was going to be open to it, but I looked into it more and realized, well, I don't have to be a salesperson. I just have to be a hard worker. I had roots on a farm. I knew what hard work was, and I worked my way through high school. So I went out and sold books, and it was just an amazing. I wasn't one of the top salespeople or anything like that. I think back in 1975, I made about $4,000, but that was when, tuition at Madison was $250 a semester. I mean, $4,000 was a lot of money, and I ended up saving quite a bit of it. But it changed my life. And I remember, because what it taught me was how to work hard. I mean, I was clean all summer, didn't party, just went to work. And we worked hard, and the whole team was out there working hard. But what I remember was one of my last weeks out there, I was leaving a meeting, and my manager was driving me back to where I was staying, me and another guy. And I was thinking about all the things I'd learned. I'd met 3,000 families that summer. I sat in people's homes. I sat on their front porch. I actually made some sales. I mean, it was like life long, on fast forward, because you see 3,000 people in 3 months, you learn a lot, how to think on your feet, you gain self-confidence. It changed my life. And I remember watching the city of Los Angeles go by. That's where I was in LA. And I looked over at my manager and I said, Dick, I just want to thank you for everything you taught me, because I could not have done this without your help. I mean, this has been a major, major deal. And he just looked at me and he said, you could have done, you didn't mean me. He just kind of laughed, And then I remember turning back, looking at the buildings going by and the freeway. And I thought to myself, he must really feel great right now. Because if he doesn't, it's because I did not effectively communicate how much he impacted my life. And then the next thought hit me. What if someone could feel that way about me someday? What if I could actually impact a life? And that's what made me come back and do it again. I brought a team out, and every year I brought a team out, and I saw guys go, I saw guys struggle, and men and women do well. I became full time after college. They invited me to come on full time, and I did it for another 17, 18 years after that, because it changed my life. And I saw kids come to Christ, and if they didn't come to Christ, they at least knew where I stood. Most importantly, on the topic of life. It was an amazing journey, and that's where I met my wife.
Let's talk about the idea of parents and how important parents are. Of course, early on in your book, you do talk about how your parents had an incredible impact on your life, the first 12 years of your life. And my wife and I, we have, as you know, we have 7 children. Our 8th child is on the way. And so talk about how important those formative years are for children and how they had an impact on your life that then even impacts your life today.
Oh, I think it was incredible, because, I mean, we had I had a mom and dad. There was 5 of us kids, and my dad had a brother, Uncle Clifford, who lived with us also. They were farming partners, but just, going to church, going to school, and getting up and doing chores and working together. I mean, when the summertime came, we had to bale hay. We had to mix feed for the cows and the pigs. And, I mean, there was responsibilities, and I think it was an appreciation for things. We weren't wealthy at all. I mean, we were farmers. I think my dad had a couple jobs like a carpenter, and he sold life insurance. I think he sold oil for the cattle too. I mean, looking back, I know he must have at times thought, how am I going to afford these 5 kids? But I thought I just think, and all the people around us from church, from school, you didn't misbehave because you knew your mom and dad were going to find out about it, and
You mentioned your wife, that you met her at the organization you're selling books at, and tell me about a little bit of that story and how having a good partner in life is really important.
well, yeah, I remember I had been working. I think I was probably about 6 years older than her. I was, my second or third year as a sales manager. She was a freshman at Madison. She walked in the interview room, and it was a rule. You don't even think about any relationships because obviously it's just good, it's moral and everything else. But we worked
Yeah.
together. She did a good job, and she was sharp. And then she came back the next year though, and she recruited 24 people to go with her. Now, in all the 18 years I did, I'd never had anyone recruit that many people. I had a few of them recruit 10 or 15, another 20 but they recruit 24 people, and she was sharp. So, she had a lot of sharp guys on her team because I think they wanted to follow her. She did a great job. But in the process, I mean, when you have someone who's working that hard and getting that done, you end up spending a lot of time together. And what happened is we developed a very, very strong mutual respect for one another. She respected me because she saw what I was doing, and Madison wasn't my only campus. I had all over the place, but I had respect for her for what she was accomplishing too. And it was about a year later we got married. It dawned on me. I thought she's pretty special, and I think she must have thought I was too. So we got married. I think we had about 3 or 4 dates. We got engaged in February and married in April. But it's amazing because she always stayed involved with the business, and she actually went out and sold because she had a team she was going to go out with. So that first year we were married, we were apart a little bit. But even through the years, when we had situations pop up, she was so sensitive to what the needs of the students were and how they were feeling, and they loved her. And she did some training parts in sales school, so not just my students, but a lot of the students knew her, and that's how we ended up keeping some young ladies at our house. In the 90s, we had 4. This is part of what it is the same heart, the same mind. We had 4 different women stay with us while they were pregnant because they said they were going to have an abortion. And we kind of put the deal out, said, well, listen, if you live with us, we'll adopt the baby. And then you can go back to Madison or back to whatever school you're from, and life will continue. And a lot of that was my wife and just her heart for the unborn, my heart for the unborn. And it was important.
Yeah. So tell me about if someone wants to get involved with Both Hands and the incredible work that you're doing, tell us how they can get involved.
There's several ways to get involved. One way, obviously, because we don't take any money out of the 21.5 million we've raised. We take nothing out. So the only way we keep the payroll is by people donating to operations. So sometimes people donate and they know 100% is going to operations. But that's one way you can donate. Another way is if you know somebody who's adopting. Adoption is expensive. I mean, it's really expensive, and there's a lot of reasons why. If you know anyone who's adopting, this is a great way to raise money. Our average family right now raises about $23,000. And Brian, if you raise $23,000 and then you combine that with a $17,000 tax credit you get from the government, already you're up to $40,000. I mean,
Yeah.
this can take a big chunk out of the money you have to raise to adopt. But if you know anybody who's afraid to adopt, like I was, because it was so expensive, and most times it's the guys because they're the ones who are leading the household and they're in charge of the finances. They feel like we can't afford it. We can't afford $40,000. If you know somebody like that, tell them to look at bothhands.org because we can help that. The other way people can get involved is if you want to raise money for anything that's orphan related. I mean, anything that's kids in trouble, traffic kids, foster care. You know what? We had an organization. Actually, it was 7th grade dads. A guy came to a project. He worked on the project. He couldn't believe what it was like. He said, I got to have my son experience it. So he got 9 dads in this. It was a private Christian school, and their 7th grade sons. It was a father-son event. Yeah, I mean, it's awesome. And they found a widow in a little town they were in, and they all sent letters out. Now, they weren't raising money for an adoption because they were dads and sons, but they raised money for a foster care closet at a local church. They served a widow. She was blown away, and they raised $8,000 for the foster care closet.
I love it.
fundraising model.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times, at least here in St. Louis, there's this thing called a trivia night, but also golf tournaments and 5Ks and marathons and all of these different things. I love this concept because you are serving while you are raising money. It's a both and it's a win-win-win across the board. And the moment I heard about the concept, I loved it. I loved it. And you've really done something to have a revolutionary idea here. So our guest, JT Olson, the author of The Orphan, The Widow, and Me. JT, thank you very much for being on the program.
It is my honor. Thank you for having me. Keep up the great work, Brian. You are doing awesome stuff.